Hello and welcome to Dungeon Arcade Kids, the podcast with myself, Adam, as your dungeon master, my younger brother, Michael, my good friend from college, Alex, and his younger brother, Nate, because we're a family podcast here. All right, and then one more just for safety. You ready for this one?
Can't wait.
Welcome to Dungeon Arcade, our BDSM fan podcast today. Role-playing games.
Okay. Didn't sign up for this.
We're playing children. This is a very niche targeted audience that we're going
very
for.
problematic one too.
I'm not sure there's a niche market for this that is legal. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah. Definitely not.
Yeah, sounds sketchy.
All right. Well, to dig us out of this hole,
Thank you.
We so Dungeon Arcade is an actual play podcast where the four of us, potentially another person, if someone wants to play, or hey, maybe someday we'll have a Patreon, and if you pay us enough, I'll put you on here. I don't know how much I'd sell my soul for. I'll be honest. We might find out. But
I'd do it for like $5, honestly.
That's
It's better than nothing.
$5. That's really not worth it. Okay. So this is our episode, or our session 0, as it's known, which basically means we are talking about the characters that everyone will be playing, sort of establishing the groundwork for the rest of the campaign, and laying out some rules for what I hope are going to be some really fun additions to our game that I haven't really seen anywhere else, but I'm sure exist in some way, shape, or form in the world. So, and our whole intention here is to have some fun, maybe inspire you to do something a little out there, and enjoy this crazy world of ours. So let's actually roll around and we will introduce everybody. I said Michael is my younger brother, so we'll start here. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about the character you are playing?
He is Asher. He is a human ranger. What else do you want to know?
So how old is Asher? I guess so. I guess I didn't say this up front. We're playing Dungeon Arcade Kids, which means that everyone in this game, every one of our player characters are going to be kids of some kind. I think the age range I threw out was like 10 to 13, 9 to 13, somewhere in there. So how old is Asher?
He is like 12 years old.
12 years old. Because of that, I assume that, is he coming from a family of rangers and that's why he claims ranger, or is he orphaned in the woods and became a ranger by default? Not to write your backstory for you, but
he was actually orphaned.
Okay.
His parents were killed, and because they were actually rangers.
How old was Asher when his parents were killed?
About 7. So he still had enough knowledge that he could survive out there on like berries and things like that. And so he's basically just kind of sworn fealty to the natural world, He just loves it all.
So then just to sort of establish that our 3 characters all know each other, how did Asher wind up in the metropolis that is Ankh-Morpork? For those of you who don't know, our game is going to take place on the Discworld, which is the sole property of the Terry Pratchett estate. And Ankh-Morpork is the largest city on the disc, which is carried on the back of 4 elephants, which ride on the back of a giant turtle swimming through the universe.
Well, he ended up there because he was actually looking for a teacher. Because he spent several years out in the wilderness on his own, but it wasn't really enough that he could be the kind of guide through the wilderness that he wants to be, and so he's actually looking for someone to help him along in that path.
Okay. And then last question for Asher. Well, for you, Michael, or Asher, I guess. If you want to answer this in character, I'm okay with it. What does a ranger do?
In the universe of Discworld, they mainly are either hermits, just people who live out in the woods for no real reason, or one of the main things they do is they actually guide people through kind of like dangerous forests and things like that, to kind of minimize the casualties of the area, basically.
Cool.
I have to ask before we move on from Asher, are either of his arms made out of anything interesting?
No.
Okay.
I don't understand the
I
context.
don't understand that either.
Yeah, I'm lost.
Nate would get it. His name's Asher?
Oh, no, I got it. Oh, my God.
It was a Destiny joke.
Oh,
Carry on.
Well, again?
Ratchet concentration shattering machinery.
excuse me, guys. It's 2018. I think it's time we move on from Destiny.
Dude, Destiny
Rest in
2 is
peace, our
popping
boy
off
Cade.
right now.
Destiny 2 just came out, or like the new
Year 2
expansion
did.
just came out. So
See, thank you.
For our listeners, I'm like basically the one person on this podcast who doesn't game. Not because I don't enjoy gaming. I just don't, for whatever reason. So I know none of this. All of those will go over my head.
Awesome.
All right, let's jump over to Nate. Nate, tell me a little bit about your character. Give me a name, race, class, all that good stuff.
Cool. Do you just want me to go with like the whole backstory? I guess I've got it written down here.
Give me let's just give me a name. Let's do this more interview style. So give me just
Okay.
like a little snippet here, and I'll flesh it out as we go along.
Cool. I am playing, and I now realize how similar the name is, Dashner. He goes by. he goes.
that's amazing.
Yeah. He goes by Dash though for short. So Dash Roxton is his name. He is a
That's
werewolf
a
fighter.
ridiculous name. I love it.
Yeah, he's a werewolf fighter.
All right, werewolf fighter. Now, how old is Dash?
He is 11, but he turns 12 in a month and 11 days. He's very excited.
I love it. Okay, so I'm trying to remember now. I said earlier that we're playing in the Disc world. That being said, I don't think, Michael, you might have read a Terry Pratchett book. Has anyone else in this group of people actually read a Terry Pratchett book besides myself?
Nope.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Okay.
Yeah, I have.
And you have. Okay. So that being said, we're really playing Calvin ball with a lot of these rules going through here. Nate, you told me you did a little bit of research on werewolves, and I can't.
Just a little, yeah.
So werewolves are going to come from the Uber world familially, but they can also be turned into werewolves via being bitten because of the virus. So is Dash a natural born werewolf, or was he turned a werewolf?
He was turned a werewolf.
Okay. And so I guess because he was turned, I'm trying to remember, are werewolves the ones that have like the pedigree, like they have the whole like naming thing to do with their family, or is that vampires? Maybe vampires.
I didn't see anything about that. I did kind of just skim a Wikia page though, so
Probably
they
not.
very well could be.
Cool. These are the sorts of insights you're looking to get here.
Yep. Wiki.ispace.
No worries. So you were turned a werewolf. At what age were you turned a werewolf?
9.
9. And what did your parents have to say about that, or were your parents even in the picture at that point?
The whole way that it kind of went down was he got in an argument over with his parents and kind of ran out of the house as children do, and was like trying to catch his composure out in the woods, like behind a tree, and he ended up falling asleep, where a noble family of werewolves were playing game with a human at the time, which for reference is a human will get a head start to try to outrun a pack of werewolves, and if they succeed, the werewolves pay them a large amount of money and treat them to dinner at their manor. If the human is caught, they are the dinner at the manor. So this was going.
That doesn't seem like a good game.
No,
It really doesn't. But this was going on, and one of the ones who was playing saw Dash sleeping behind the tree there and just saw the leg and thought it was their target and bit Dash on the leg before realizing that he had picked the wrong target, therefore infecting him.
Okay. How did your parents react?
They weren't too thrilled, obviously. After the werewolf had bit Dash on the leg, they immediately rushed him back to their manor, because this would be a very bad look if they just left this kid out in the woods, and found his parents. The parents were not thrilled, obviously, that their son has now been infected with werewolfism, or whatever the official name is. I can't imagine they're
lycanthropy.
terribly ecstatic.
Yeah, it'd be Lanthropy.
Lanthropy, yeah, that's the name of it.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, lycanthropy, I believe.
Lycanthropy,
Yeah,
whatever. Werewolfism.
Werewolfism. Werewolfitis, if you will. Okay. So how? I guess just I'm curious how. Okay. So they rush him back to the house. Obviously, they can't do anything about it. Have they given up Dash, or is he just being hidden in the house, or what has happened?
As an attempt to kind of make things better, because this isn't necessarily an easy transition for a child with random transformations and stuff like that. This is the thing I had a question about earlier. They gave him something known as the Crescent Moon Pendant, which is kind of an artifact that helps those infected with lycanthropy help control transformations unless forced upon by a full moon, to kind of help him keep this secret hidden until a full moon is actually out and about.
I like that.
So as long as he has this pendant on him or with him, he's able to kind of control whether he's in wolf or human form.
Okay. Can we? I really like that. I want to add something to it that I think could be really interesting. I basically what I'm thinking here is that in order to get the pendant, your Dash's parents would have had to offer up something in return. Anyone powerful enough to make such a pendant wouldn't really have needs for material goods. So essentially what they are doing in getting you the pendant is offering you in service to this being.
That would be
so
probably
it's
pretty good.
So it's not necessarily that, you're just going to be following this guy around, obviously, but it's just when he calls on you, you're expected to be there and to respond.
Yeah.
Which I think, for the audience, we can put this in later if we want. But just to kind of verbalize what I'm thinking with you guys right now, because I think now's a good time to talk about it. Oh man, I just got to jot that note down. In service.
If it helps with notes and all of that, the name of the noble family is the Fenric family.
The Fenric. I like it a lot. So the plan here is I'm going to be running the primary campaign. The three of you guys are, and woman, we'll meet here in a moment, are connected in a means that we will find out here in a few minutes. But in order to make it so that way the campaign doesn't sort of stale itself, just to kind of help extend the longevity of the campaign, I want it to be that Alex, Michael, and Nate, you guys are all running sort of side quests or individual campaigns for another character or another player character. So, for example, someone is going to be running a campaign for Dash here, and I'm imagining that this person that Dash is in service to is basically the person that you'll be running to sort of, set up the scenarios in which Dash will be given quests and things like that. For Asher, I'm imagining that has something to do with the Rangers Guild in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I think just sort of generically the Rangers Guild. I would imagine in Ankh-Morpork there's a collection of people who associate as the Rangers Guild. And for Alex, we'll talk about your character and kind of figure out what that would look like too.
Cool.
Because I don't necessarily want to. I was thinking something similar for your character initially, but seeing Ash's, we might be able to come up with something better for your character.
Okay.
So we're not sort of copying two ideas, but maybe copying two ideas isn't the worst thing in the world. So Dash contracts lycanthropy at the age of 9. Do your parents live in Ankh?
Yeah, he's just native to that town.
Okay. So you would be, well, I imagine actually because there's sort of a nobility, because you have a family name, it would probably be more likely that you are actually on the Morpork side of the city, which is sort of where the nobles live. I guess how have people reacted to this?
I honestly don't.
You're a werewolf, or?
Yeah, I think honestly he hasn't really told anyone. I think his parents know. I'm sure whenever he becomes friends, or if he is currently already friends with the other characters, because we're all children, I'm sure he would let that little secret slip pretty easily. But I think otherwise he's been like pretty worried about other people finding out and like what other people would think like around his age, because he's still kind of growing up and doesn't want to have that weird image about him. He doesn't want to be that weird kid that's a werewolf now. And I think he's just kind of been hiding it.
Okay. Cool. And then you are wanting to go with fighter for your class too.
Yeah.
So you guys, so our listeners know I wrote up a list of classes that all have the similar names as Wizards of the Coast uses, or fairly generic. Most role playing systems use these sort of class names, and what we wrote for fighter was fighter has no clearly defined boundaries in what a fighter is, from soldier to drunk. Anyone can be a fighter. The question is, what do they fight for? And the more corrupt the cause, the more powerful a fighter is. But in corrupting themselves, they're also losing themselves. So there's sort of this tension between, wanting to become more powerful, but also not wanting to lose yourself. So every conflict has a selfish and a positive outcome. So the more selfish the fighter is, the more corrupt they can become, and the more powerful they're likely to be. But that also means they're more likely to be the pawn of something else. Actually works really well with that pendant. I like that a lot. So what is it that Dash is a fighter for? Is it himself? Is it family? Is it honor? Is there something else that you sort of tension that with? And if there is, if there's something else that you're thinking that I haven't listed, obviously let us know.
No, I definitely think he's kind of fighting more for himself at this point, more than anything else. He's obviously still being like called to aid the Fenricks and stuff like that, and is helping to serve them and all of that, and was like, it's definitely going to fight for his parents and family and like those that he cares about. But I think at this point, after all that has happened, he's just kind of out to make sure he is okay, and like everything that he wants to go right is still going right for him. It's more like a more healthy mindset to make sure that he is not sacrificing his own happiness at this point to please or like make someone else better, because he's had to endure stuff already.
All right. Perfect. I love it. All right, and that brings us to Alex.
Yes.
You want to tell us a little bit about your character?
Sure
What you got
thing.
for us?
Yes, I am playing Ella Silverridge. She's a 12-year-old gnome rogue. She's
Gnome rogue.
kind of emo kid, brooding, wearing dark, not talking much kind of person.
So tell us a little bit about Ella. How did Ella find her way to Ankh?
So she grew up in a village other than Ankh-Morpork, and her parents would always like fight. They would be very violent, and she would often like retreat to avoid that, as one would. And then one night, her mom woke her up in the middle of the night and like stole her away. They were leaving their situation, went on a long journey, which ended in Ankh-Morpork, which was a town that they had no associations with, in an effort to, escape her father and that whole situation. And on that journey, she kind of experienced adventure in the outside world for the first time, and it kind of awoke something in her that she had not experienced before, having been confined mostly to that village and living mostly in fear to that point. So that is what brought her to that town.
Okay, so she came with her mom. How has that been, I guess, as a single mom taking care of the daughter in, I mean, what is essentially a medieval fantasy world?
Right.
I can't imagine that's particularly easy.
Yeah, Ella actually really looks up to her mom. When they arrived at Ankh-Morpork, she worked really hard to, provide for the both of them by, she calls herself a tradesman or a tradeswoman, I guess. And she comes into possession of various goods by means of which she never really reveals, and then will sell them to other people, and that's how she makes money. But because of the nature in which she comes into possession of these goods, which Ella doesn't know, it's kind of a boom or bust sort of thing where she'll make a whole lot of money one day and then not make any for a long time. And so, it turns out that being pretty conniving, her mom sort of hatched this plan, which Ella was totally on board with, where she would drop her off in an orphanage saying that she is leaving town, doesn't want to take her along, so that the orphanage would care for Ella, give her the food and the shelter and all that, while her mom could make the money that she, makes doing her business, and not have to use it to spend it on Ella. And then Ella, in the meantime, would get actually probably a better means of living than she would if she was still with her mom. So she sneaks out a lot, doesn't have a whole lot of friends, if any, in the orphanage, but will meet up with her mom a lot. They stay pretty close. And she doesn't have the responsibility or the financial burden of caring for her.
So Ella still regularly sees her mom then. She hasn't abandoned her.
Yeah. They see each other pretty frequently, if not consistently, she'll sneak out a lot. She'll get, messages from her in some way, or she'll go on her own volition. But, it's not like every Tuesday they meet for lunch. It's just kind of like whenever the time is right, she'll sneak out and meet up with her.
Right. And you said that Ella isn't aware of how her mom gets the things that she sells. So I guess it's an interesting choice for you to make Ella a rogue. Does that, are we to imply there that Ella's mom has used Ella to acquire the things that she's selling in some way? Or is it just she sort of has a natural proclivity to that, being small, unnoticed, avoiding authority figure?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that Ella's mom has ever used her to do her deeds for her. Maybe there's a possible future where she sees that being potential, but I don't know, maybe she wants to protect her from that to this point. Ella, though, does have like a propensity for mischief and creating some chaos, using those skills. One of her favorite things to do is, because she sneaks out a lot, even if it's not to meet up with her mom, she'll use her stealthy skills to try and do things without people noticing. Her crowning achievement, she would say, is going to like a tavern, taking one person's entire plate of food, swapping it with that of another person without either of them knowing, and then, witnessing the chaos that happened as a result. So she's definitely sneaky and likes to, use that to her advantage, and even like for fun and, like to entertain herself.
I like that. Okay. So I don't think I have any other questions about Ella in particular. So initially what I was thinking, and again, we're putting some things out there, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what the entire sort of sub campaign for everyone's character has to be about. Obviously, we're all pretty flexible people and we're trying to have fun. My initial thought was that Ella might be scouted by the Thieves Guild, and sort of tries to hide it from her mother, which I think would be really interesting to deal with Ella operating as a thief and almost being ashamed of that and hiding it from her mother, who is definitely a thief, but
right.
A thief not in not operating under the like acceptable means of thiefdom.
Yeah.
Which I think would be interesting, but I also don't necessarily want to step too much on Asher's. I guess Asher's whole thing is about being a ranger. Most of his stuff probably won't even take place within the city of Ankh.
No, probably not.
I feel like those are different enough. Like they're just guilds.
Yeah, I could see that. And then even her willingness or unwillingness to be a part of something that has kind of like some guidelines and, and bureaucracy would be an interesting thing for Ella to deal with.
And the thing about the Thieves Guild is like, it's really important that the thieves don't kill people either.
Yeah.
Because that's the Assassin's Guild job. And so they get very upset when they cross each other's toes and, stuff like that. So like there is this really intense structure with the Thieves Guild where, it's not like we'd have to ask Ella to, put herself in an exceptionally compromising position, like being a part of the Assassin's Guild or something like that.
Sure.
It's just sort of, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Perfect. So we have Asher, who's 12, Dash, who is 11, but turns 12 in a month and 11 days, and Ella, who is also 12. So I'm glad we all happen to choose names that are ages that are all really close to each other.
And two names.
And Asher and Dashner.
Isn't Dashner one of the
I'm
reindeer?
really glad I came up with the nickname for it now. It would have been really bad otherwise.
It would have been really quick to call you Dash from then on.
Did you know that Adam's car is named Dash?
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah.
Similarities never end.
It's amazing. Okay. I have a selection of character questions for everybody. I've done this before when we've ran campaigns where it's just sort of trying to flesh out more psychologically what your character might be thinking. Alex and Michael, you guys have been a part of campaigns with me where I've done this. I'd like to go through it. I don't need you to necessarily answer all of the questions, but if you feel like you have a good answer for a question, then feel free to jump in. But the whole point of this is just to sort of help you think about your character, and then if you feel like you have a good answer for something, it helps me sort of figure out how to play off your characters too. So the first question, which actually I would like all of you to answer, is what is something your character wants? This can be a physical thing, or it can be more, ethereal sort of thing, acceptance, or it can be, I want this particular item, or whatever. So just something you generally want.
I think for Dash, probably the answer, you came pretty close to saying it yourself, with acceptance. I think his is almost the confidence to make himself accepted. Like, instead of more like if you were to see a group of kids, less thinking, well, what happens when they find out, and more thinking, I deserve to go talk to those kids and have some friends, if that makes sense. Like the confidence to get over whatever he is and just be like, I'm still a kid and I want to talk to those people, so I'm going to go do that. I think that's kind of what he wants right now.
So he almost needs to learn how to accept himself, or parse out the individual parts of him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
I think Ella has like a real longing for just like adventure and excitement, and if not necessarily for like gain or to like come across some treasure or whatever, but as someone who was living in fear for most of her life and who still has lots of like aversion to danger, and not a whole lot of like meaningful relationships. I think for her, she wants to, like experience adventure and excitement and like do cool stuff. As kind of like broad as that is, like she wants to get out there and mess it up,
Right. She really wants to do a semester in Europe.
Yeah. A semester in Europe where she'll experiment with all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
Asher, as somebody who has grown up in the woods, he has kind of seen both ends of the spectrum of like what kind of happens to the natural world when civilization is not kind of kept in check. But then he's also seen what the natural world can do to civilization in return when it's not kept in check. So I think he's mostly looking for the means to kind of keep those two in balance, to try and protect both the civilized world and the natural world kind of from each other.
I like that.
I think to add on to Ella, I was just thinking, I think too, she like wants to make friends. She's never really had friends. And even since she's been in this orphanage, she hasn't even really tried. And I don't think that she would necessarily say that she wants that or realizes it, but maybe deeper down without her realizing it, that's a desire of hers too.
Yeah. I like going back to Asher's thing. I want to swing back around to that friends thing with Ella on a later question, I think. Going back to Asher, I really like this idea of Asher basically growing up in nature forever, but then having to go to a city to find someone to teach him how to be a ranger, and sort of the irony of that.
Yeah.
So I like that idea of like, he accepts this sort of idea of civilized versus natural, and, finding balance between those.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to decide which question I want to ask next. What is a weakness that your character has that your character thinks is a strength?
Asher is way too confident.
Confidence. It's key.
He is like to the point he will put himself in way over his head.
I think Ella's like really, really perceptive and like aware of everything that's going on around her. and that's probably something that she would consider a strength, but it also, is probably one of the main reasons why she doesn't necessarily connect super well with people either, is that she's not often super like present or engaged in other people and like them, and she's more like worried about what's going on around them and analyzing stuff.
I think for Dash, his is probably more along the lines of like his independence, like the fact that he feels like I've been through something and I'm able to more or less kind of take care of it with only the help of this pendant on my own. Like I can kind of control this a little bit. And I think his thing, like he thinks like if something were to happen, there's nothing, like I don't have any friends that would be like upset, or like I don't have anyone that I'm hurting or really affecting negatively. So I think he thinks his independence is kind of a strength, and that he's able to go through it alone. But at the same time, he kind of doesn't have that person to like turn to because he's so self-reliant. He will gladly choose himself over other people.
What is something your character is very good at that they think they're very bad at?
I don't know. The biggest thing I can think of for Ella is like empathy, like she's pretty reserved and tends to herself pretty much. And other people see her, like the way that she dresses and like her energy and stuff, and tend to stay away too. But because of what she's experienced, she does like feel for people and cares for people, but I don't know. She doesn't have, I guess, a whole lot of opportunities to act on that or to be in a place where she can feel it, Yeah,
I'd say she doesn't have like the social capital to really utilize that as a skill.
Yeah, and so she probably thinks of herself as like a loner and not good with people, but if and when she would have that chance, I think she'd be quite adept at it.
I think Asher has kind of been out on his own in the woods for like almost half of his life, and so he doesn't really he's never really had any like formal teaching really, because his parents died when he was too young to really start any of that. And so I think he's not as wise or he thinks he's not as wise as he actually is, but he's actually like pretty open-minded. He's like I said, he's kind of favoring both the natural and the civilized world, and so he kind of has that kind of neutral perspective on it, I guess.
I think for Dash, his would probably be he is much better than he thinks he actually is at like sympathizing with other people and kind of relating to them and understanding where they're coming from, because he's so used to not really and like reserving to himself. He kind of thinks he's unable to really relate to other people, but at the same time, due to his circumstances, he's actually really good at like understanding where people are coming from and kind of seeing through that difference or like that hardship as he would want other people to do for him, but he just doesn't know it or doesn't think he's great at it because he can't get over himself enough to actually go make friends.
I really like that, because there's sort of these two sides of that coin between Dash and Ella, where Ella probably sees herself as fairly empathic, but no one else really does. And so she doesn't think she is necessarily. Whereas Dash just doesn't think he is, even though he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. And then Asher, I really like that. I like what you said too, because I think that makes for an interesting, if you're finding a teacher, how does your teacher interact with someone who is exceptionally confident, but also like really good at what they do, but also like within like deep down, they don't think they are. Yeah. So
they don't really Asher doesn't really understand the difference between intelligence and wisdom. I think
Right.
would be a better way of putting it.
Yeah. And so I think it makes for an opportunity to like find, a good teacher sort of finding what, bringing out what the student already knows, sort of, mentality.
Yeah.
Makes for interesting. Who, where, or what is your character's base? What grounds your character to this side of life? And I think, especially thinking about this as sort of kids, when like real little kids are left alone in a room, they come back to their mom and then they go and play some more. And then they come back to their mom, they go play some more. And that's sort of, mom is their base. So, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be, a thing or a person. It can, it could be like an idea, like this is my calling. And so I need to be here for it. Or it could be like, this was, the place where I learned about this. And that's, I'm reminded of this incident here.
I think for Asher, it would definitely be a place like this one particular cave that he was able to take shelter in, because he was out in the woods on his own. It's pretty dangerous, and so that was like the one place where he had like really any semblance of safety.
Like that. But then it's this really big thing for him to leave this place, even just to go find a teacher. It like demonstrates the importance of this to Asher.
Yeah.
I think with Ella, she would, if she were asked to think about this, and this is, probably true to some degree, she would say like her ability to, like sneak out and do little pranky sort of things. I mean, they're not always pranks. Sometimes she actually steals stuff, but like, I think that proves to her that she has, like agency in the world and the ability to make some sort of impact, right, by being able to do those things. But I think that she would say and think that she, is pretty independent from her mom, and doesn't necessarily need her. But I think her like meetings with her are grounding for her as well, probably a lot more than she would admit or realize.
I think for Dash, it's probably also a place. I think it's like around or even behind that same tree that he was resting behind whenever he got bit. He just goes there, like if he ever needs to, like whenever he got into argument with his parents, if he ever needs to like calm down or have a place to think, I think he goes out near that like specific part of the woods he was in, just kind of chilling. And I think he transforms into like wolf form so that he's just an inconspicuous like animal out in the woods. So he has time alone to himself to think without being bothered and kind of reflect on his own thoughts and where he's at right now.
And what's interesting about that to me is there's sort of, I guess, between the two people that chose places, Asher chooses his. I have no idea where I wrote his. Oh, I see what happened. Never mind. Asher chooses his because it's where he was. It's where he was safe. It's what he called home. It's where he, became sort of the person he is and built the strength to move on. Whereas Dash has this tree that like was his place of serenity that was turned into this place of relatively intense trauma. And he still manages to see it as this place of serenity still. I don't have anything else to say about that. I just think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Just as we're thinking through characters, not,
Yeah.
Not everything needs an answer or a reply. I asked that question.
I know people that would say otherwise.
Yeah. Hey, and those people are probably valid too. Okay, so I have 3 questions left. I'm going to ask all 3, and you choose one to answer. Okay. What would make your character happy? Okay. And this can be this. I want it to be different from the what does your character want? It's sort of like this is like, sorry about this train, you guys can probably hear. It's a almost like a guilty pleasure sort of thing, or like this just, it brings joy to this person's life. The second question is, what does your character fear losing the most? And the third is, what makes them self-conscious? Again, trying to think about this as like an 11 or a 12-year-old. And just answer one, please.
I think for the self-conscious thing, there is something I wrote. We didn't really get into it until like the actual physical description of the character. I think for Dash, he has light brown hair, but there's like a silver streak kind of in like the middle near the bangs that he was just born with there. And whenever he transforms into a wolf, it takes on like the fur takes on the silver rather than the brown. So I think whenever he's in human form, sometimes he gets self-conscious if people are like staring or looking at him like, well, maybe they've seen a silver wolf and maybe they know. And like he starts getting self-conscious that people have found out just based off of like this random little inconspicuous part of him that accidentally took another form when he was bitten.
Like that. That's a nice touch.
I think the fear question's interesting for Ella because she's pretty like ingrained with like being motivated by fear. Not that that's always a bad thing. Sometimes that's like a useful thing in, life-threatening situations or whatever. But
right.
Yes,
it's good to fear when your life is in danger.
For sure. But I think
we're going to take a hard stance.
Yeah, that's a pretty hot take there. I think she's like fearful of conflict. And I don't know. I think she's just like fearful of, I don't know. She's got kind of like these dual things going on where she really like craves adventure and doing kind of like risky stuff, but she's also really like afraid of what would happen like if she got caught or whatever, and like often flees like conflict or stuff like that. And yeah, maybe that fear is kind of what like drives her and like motivates her to doing those things, is maybe she doesn't want to feel scared. And so she tries to like push past it to take risks or something. I don't know. But yeah, I think she's generally pretty fearful of just like, yeah, getting into trouble and getting into like danger or, getting hurt or whatever.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I think that's a fairly human experience for most people. I think people don't. I think generally speaking, people don't like being afraid. Another hot take for you guys.
Yeah, you're full of them.
Just full of those today. And so I think it's really, it's really interesting that it's that fear is also motivating for her. I guess personally, like I don't like heights. Just not a fan of heights, but at the same time, I hate being afraid of heights. So I, do things like I go rock climbing or I ride roller coasters and, things like that. Like they're things that like are just enough to like pull me back into what is probably a safer risk in experience chasing, but it's not so much that it holds me back completely. And so I like this idea of Ella sort of dealing with this conflict where it's like, what is the thing that is going to like push her too far, that it's going to like this fear will legitimately hold her back from that, or will this fear hold her back from achieving what she really wants,
Yeah. And I think what pulls her to like flee from stuff most of the time is that like it's a fear of conflict or confrontation, like she'll mess with stuff, like do little pickpocket foolery things. But if someone were to like say, hey, what are you doing? Cut it out. Like she's gone, she's not messing with it.
Right.
Or, similarly, like if she's at the orphanage and trying to sneak out or whatever, and someone sees her again, she's running away. She's not dealing with it. Yeah.
Nice. I like that. Oh, that just leaves us with Asher.
Asher is afraid of interacting with people.
Yeah. We've got three like super not social.
Well,
awkward
the thing is though, like he has spent so much of his life like alone, and so he's kind of got that fear of not being able to really connect with anybody. And so one thing that ends up happening with him is he tends to kind of overcompensate a little bit by being, you know, too friendly and coming on a bit strong instead of being more reserved.
I like that. I think that really fits into the ranger motif really well, and like having a valid reason to do that where he just hasn't been socialized for 5 years. I guess that's actually a question I should have asked earlier. Has Asher come in contact with like humans?
A little.
Okay.
I mean, not very much. Like enough. Like he knows common from his parents, and obviously, but like
right.
And he's come in contact with like a couple other species of people, like, and because he's quick with languages, he's like kind of picked up their languages, but. You know, it's not really that much where he's, you know, a well socialized being, and by any means.
Yeah, I like that. I think it also. I feel like I guess I don't know how much everyone read about the class sheet, but I feel like everyone really hit their classes really well. I particularly like, because I had forgot that we had written that rangers can speak multiple languages and even pick up new ones in just a few minutes of conversation with foreigners. They just tend to not be able to hold the conversation that long since they're about as charming as a rotted log.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. And I love that idea that, like, you know, part of the reason is just because of this like social anxiety.
Yeah. He'll come on really strong, but that conversation's not going anywhere.
Right. All right. Perfect. Well, that is all the questions I feel like I really had prepared.